Hi, it's Amy from Polyreader. Today I want to do the Reading Women's Challenge prompt list. Reading Women's podcast is celebrating their birthday. I believe it's their second birthday this year. Yeah, so they've put together this prompt list of 24 reading prompts to encourage people to read more books by women, which is great because if you don't already know me or have been to my channel before, that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with my channel is focus on women writers. The funny thing about this list is I have already pretty much read most of the prompts this year so far without knowing, and before I actually discovered this list or Reading Women's podcast or Kendra Winchester at all. So I could technically just cross off all of the things that I've read, but I have decided that it's a really great way to challenge myself to read more and also to cross off things on my to-be-read shelf that I've been planning on reading this year and haven't got around to yet. So yeah, it's giving me a bit of a push, which I really wanted. My partner, my husband, is actually really keen to join in on this challenge with me. He actually said the other day, "Can I do the challenge with you?" And I thought, yes, please do the challenge with me. So I'm really keen to be doing it with someone else. So anyway, I could ramble on about this for a while, but I'm going to now show you the books that I have picked out to read in the challenge. Oh, one more thing. So June is the birthday month. So there's the Reading Women's Challenge for the year, which is these 24 prompts with 2 extras, which I will explain later. And then there's also the June Readathon month. So what people are doing is choosing some books from the list and then reading those throughout June. 24 to 26 books is ridiculous to get through in a month, as everybody knows. So it's not about reading them all in June, it's about reading them throughout the year, but reading as many as possible in June. Please excuse me, I am actually sick at the moment. I nearly didn't film today because I'm feeling pretty rough, so that's why my throat is a bit funny. But yeah, I figured if I don't do it today, I'm not going to have time because we're currently in the process of moving. The camera is stacked up on top of moving boxes right now, which you can't see, but yes, my life is in shambles, so I'm just going to try and squeeze this video in amongst all the other things that are going on. So prompt 1 is a book by a woman in translation, and you actually get bonus points if it's translated by a woman as well. So I have already read The Vegetarian by Han Kang, which was translated by a woman. Just trying to think who it was. Deborah Smith. So I read this earlier in the year, and I could technically cross it off. But I also have Human Acts by Han Kang, which I recently purchased secondhand, and I'm really keen to read this. So I've added this to my list as number 1. Number 2 is a fantasy novel by a woman of colour. I should have mentioned earlier, I'm kind of doing my own spin on this list. Because it's an American list, I've kind of changed the rules a little bit while still keeping the questions that are asked or the prompts that are asked. So this one is a fantasy novel by a woman of colour, and I've actually picked a dystopian historical fiction fantasy, Terra Nullius by Claire G. Coleman. This was shortlisted for the Stella Prize in Australia this year. I've got it on my Kindle and I've been really keen to read this for a while, so it's the perfect opportunity to give that a go. It's a dystopian take on Australian history, so it sounds right up my alley. It sounds like it's going to be quite intense and close to home, so to say. So yeah, I'm really keen to get into that one. Prompt 3 is a novel set in the American South. I am going to stick with this prompt, and believe it or not, this is the most classic take on this prompt, but I have never read To Kill a Mockingbird. So I'm going to add this to my list. It's been on my shelf for a really long time and I've never got around to it, so it's the perfect opportunity to get this under my belt. Number 4 is a short story collection. I've read a lot of short story collections this year. I love short story collections. I have decided to read another. So I've decided to read The Love of a Bad Man by Laura Elizabeth Willett. This is on hold for me at the library. I was going to go to the library yesterday and pick up all of the books I had on hold specifically to film this video and start getting into them, but I have been sick, and yesterday I was feeling really horrible, so I just didn't leave the house. But that's okay, you can see a picture of it here. So this book is the exploration of women throughout history who have dealt with bad men. So it's a historical short fiction novel, or it's historical short fiction, I should say. For example, serial killers, criminals. I believe Hitler is one of the men that I dealt with in this short story collection, so it sounds really interesting. I'll put a review up when I'm finished that, because I'm sure a lot of people on BookTube would love to read this one. Hopefully I'll find a way for you all to get it over in America and the UK. So prompt 5 is read a graphic novel or memoir by a woman. Now, I originally was going to pick this one, and that is Everything is Teeth by Evie Wyld, because it's Australian, and I've been meaning to read it for a while. So I got this out from the library, but then I realised it's actually illustrated by a man, and I thought it doesn't really cover all bases. So I could technically check this one off my list, but I'm going to instead finish Persepolis. I started this last year, and then I had so many books coming in that I just kind of forgot about it, and I only got a quarter of the way through. So I'm going to finish this book. Essentially, it's a graphic novel about Iranian girl living through the Islamic Revolution. So it's quite intense, educational and interesting. So yeah, it was really good. I don't know why I never ended up finishing it last year. I just got caught up with other things. So it's good to be able to check this one off my list soon. Number 6 is published by Indie Press. So I'm going with From the Wreck by Jane Rawson. I feel like I'm not educated enough in publishing and indie books. This was my most wanted choice. I really wanted to fit this book in somewhere, so I thought this would probably be the ideal place for it. If I'm wrong about this, please let me know, because I probably could use some education in this area. So From the Wreck is a historical fiction. I've heard amazing reviews by a lot of people who have similar tastes to me, so I'm really looking forward to this. Apparently it's just fascinating. It's kind of like a dystopian historical fiction with like ghost aspects going on. It's about a shipwreck in the 1800s down off the Victorian coast, or maybe it's South Australian coast, I think. Apparently there's octopus and animals and lots of wild things going on, so that is like top of my list. Can't wait to read that soon. Number 7 is a book set in Russia or by a Russian author. So my husband actually picked this one out. It's The Big Green Tent by, you know what, I'm not going to pronounce that last name because I'm just going to butcher it, so I'll put the surname here. So this is another historical fiction. Seems to be my top choice. It's a saga about 3 friends living in the Soviet Union. Number 8 is a viewpoint character by an immigrant or a refugee. So naturally I've gone with an Australian book, and it's called Australia Day by Melanie Cheng. This is another one I'm hiring out from the library. It's short stories. Apparently each short story is from a different perspective. So we've got the young, the old, we've got Muslim, Lebanese, all different types of cultures. Number 9 is an Australian or Canadian author. Obviously I could pick many Australian authors because that's one of my biggest focuses on this channel, but I thought I should use this opportunity to read Margaret Atwood finally, because I've never read any Margaret Atwood. Please don't shoot me. She has been, I think because she's so loved and because she's been top of my list for so long, it's almost overwhelmed me to read any of her books, because I've just found it, the expectation is so high and there's so much choice out there. She's got so many books that are raved about highly. I've just kind of avoided it. So I'm going to take this opportunity to read a Margaret Atwood. I think I'm going to go with The Cat's Eye. I think that's what it's called, The Cat's Eye. It was recommended to me by my friend from work, who's a huge Margaret Atwood fan. So yeah, I'm going to give that one a go. Number 10 is an essay collection. I have indeed read some essay collections this year. most notably adult fantasy. That was amazing. That was by an Australian author, and that one was about, you know what, I'll save it because it'll probably be in my half-yearly wrap-up of top books of the year. But instead I've decided to read a new Australian author. It's a non-fiction short stories. Some people have said you can call it an essay collection, so I'm just going to use it for this prompt. Axiomatic by Maria Tamarkin. This is her fourth book. This is another one that's been raved about. It's apparently wildly bizarre. I've ordered that and it should arrive pretty soon because yeah, it sounds like something that will be wildly appreciated across BookTube. Number 11 is a book by someone or about someone with a chronic illness. So I've picked another Australian book. It's Small Acts of Disappearance. This is a short story collection about an eating disorder. It was shortlisted or longlisted for the Stella Prize a couple of years ago. It's about, an eating disorder that begins in high school and sort of becomes this threat of death later in her adult life. It's another one I've got waiting for me at the library, so I'll be picking that up soon. Prompt number 12 is true crime. Now, I am reading a true crime book next month with my book club, and that is I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, and that's probably the most popular book going around at the moment, and I'm really excited to read this. It's going to be amazing. I could easily use this as this prompt, but there's a new book out in Australia at the moment, and I really want to focus on Australian writers here, and that's Eggshell Skull by Bree Lee. Now this is about, you know what, the details aren't that clear about exactly what goes on, but I do know it's about her experience in the court of law in Australia, and it's clearly about crime because it's through the court of law, so I'm going to add that as my prompt number 12 for true crime. I have purchased this, I'm just waiting for it to arrive. It sounds amazing, and Helen Garner wrote a great review, which always sells me, clearly. Scorching, self-sourcing, a young woman finds her steel and learns to wield it, says Helen Garner. If Helen Garner says that, then it must be true. Now, prompt 13 is another one that I've sort of adjusted to fit Australian writers. So it was originally an African-American writer about civil rights, which is an excellent prompt, and I think it's really important, especially for American people and people worldwide, to be reading. But I have read a lot of books in that category already, and I wanted to kind of spin this so that it fit the Australian demographic. So I have done The Hate Race by Maxine Beneba Clark. This is a book about growing up as a person of colour in the school system in Australia, and it sounds, quite important, and I think if you are Australian and you haven't read this book, you should add it to your list. Even though I haven't read it yet, it seems like something that we all should be making sure we have the time to read, and it should be, I think, added to school, high school reading lists as well. I think it's a really important one. So for prompt 14, I have picked, it's a classic, and you get bonus points if it's not a Bronte or a Austen. And I have picked We've Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. So this has been on my shelf for ages. This is a book that I've been meaning to get to pretty much every time I put down a book, but then there's always something else that sort of deters me. Shirley Jackson actually suffered from agoraphobia throughout her life, which is something that I've struggled with as well. So I've always been keen to read her books. We've Always Lived in the Castle is a gothic classic. Apparently it's kind of like a murder mystery, but not as gruesome. I could be wrong, but I guess I'll soon find out. So this is a short one, and it's been highly rated, so I'm really keen to get into this. For prompt 15, it's a poetry collection. I have read a couple of poetry collections this year. Salt by Naira Waheed. I'm so bad at pronouncing names, I'm sorry. That was one of my favourite poetry collections ever. I adored that. So I could cross it off, but I'm going to read a new one. It's not a new one, but new for me. And that's another Maxine Beneba Clark. She's known for her slam poetry. She's the slam poetry champion of Caribbean descent, which is amazing. So I'm really keen to read it. It's called Carrying the World, and I've got that on hold at the library as well. Number 16 is a book where characters are traveling somewhere. I have incorporated this to fit in with the Miles Franklin Award. The Life to Come by Michelle de Cristo is the book that I've picked for this prompt of characters traveling somewhere, and I'm also planning on reading this for the Miles Franklin Award list. So yeah, it was Leah's idea for us all to read a few books from the Miles Franklin and discuss. So I've picked Michelle de Cristo's The Life to Come, and I've also picked it as my prompt for this, my book for this prompt, which is Characters Are Traveling Somewhere. And I believe it's about immigration, so that's kind of how I've linked it in with traveling somewhere. And it's a portrait of modern life set across the globe. Number 17 is read a book with food in the title. And I have just finished this month Agatha Raisin and the Quiche of Death, which was amazing. I loved this book so much. It was just so comforting, and yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was sad when it was over. So I could easily cross this off, and you know what, I might end up crossing this off because the book that I picked is A Poor Man's Orange, and this is an Australian classic that my mum has been nagging me to read for a while. And I've been wanting to read it, and I thought I actually had it on my shelf, but after having a look, I don't think I do. So if I can't find a copy of that in the next few months, it may not end up being read, but I'm going to try my best because I really want to include as many Australian books in this list as I can. The 18th prompt is female Nobel Prize winner, and I have picked Toni Morrison's Beloved. That is something that I'm going to hide from the library, which is a classical historical fiction about, apparently it's like staring into the abyss of slavery, which sounds, yeah, really intense and eye-opening, so I'm really looking forward to that one. Prompt 19 is a book from the Reading Women Award last year. This is an award that the Reading Women's podcast put together, and I have chosen Sing Unburied Sing by Jessamine Wood. This is a really renowned book on BookTube at the moment. It's won and been listed for a lot of awards. It's literary fiction and magical realism, a tale of hope and struggle. So it sounds quite good, and it's on my Kindle ready to go. Number 20 is a memoir collection from someone of another country. And I have started reading Meaty by Samantha Irby. This is a really honest account of Samantha Irby's life and experiences. It's recently been re-released with a new cover, which is sort of taking Bookstagram by storm, but this is a copy that my friend from work loaned me recently, before actually the re-release came out, and I'd never heard of it before, and now it's popping up everywhere. So yeah, I'm going to finish this one. It's not really like anything I've ever read. I read a lot of memoirs, but this one is just so honest and raw and funny. Like she sort of does this funny spin on everything. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing this. I said that a lot, I'm really looking forward, but I literally am looking forward to every one of these books. So prompt 21 is inspired by a fairy tale. I didn't do a lot of research into this, but I have been meaning to read Circe by Madeline Miller. I could be pronouncing this wrong. I have had this discussion with my partner a few times, and he thinks it's pronounced in a really strange way, and it probably is, but I don't think I'm capable of doing that, so I'm just going to say Circe or Circe. I've been wanting to read this for a while. It's a new Australian book, which is a bonus for me. It's inspired by Greek mythology, so I looked up fairy tales, the definition, and it technically can be a myth, fairy tale, kind of mean the same thing, so I'm using this as my prompt for inspired by fairy tales, even though it's kind of more historical than that, I guess. To be honest, I don't know much about this story because I really don't like ruining storylines for myself, so I'm just kind of going in blind with this book, and I'm super excited because it looks amazing. I've heard Madeline Miller reading a short segment out of it recently, and yeah, it just sounds fascinating, so I'm really keen to get into that one. Prompt 22 is a book by a local author. I have chosen The Choke by Sofia Laguna. This is something I purchased recently when I saw her talking at Writers Violence Night recently at Northgate High School. So yeah, I've been really keen to crack this open. Sofia Laguna is an excellent writer. I've spoken about her before in my videos. She writes from the perspective of children really well. This is a book about violence and about a woman's or a young girl's struggle with male dominance in the world, I think. So it sounds completely up my alley, pretty much my exact topic that I'm interested in. So yeah, I'm really keen to crack this one open. Number 23 is a book that's been on your to be read for the longest. I've picked the Australian female book that's been on my to be read the longest, and that is The Spare Room by Helen Garner. I've had this book on my list for years, and I've read almost every single Helen Garner book except for this one. So this is probably the first one I'm going to read out of the whole list, because I need to get my video up for you guys about where to start with Helen Garner, as I've been asked a few times. And I don't know a lot about this. I know it's about friendship, and I know it's probably going to be amazing. It's the winner of the Queensland Premier's Literary Award, the Victorian Premier's Literary Award, the Barbara Jeffries Award, and shortlisted for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. So it sounds like it's probably going to be one of my 5 stars of the year. Okay guys, my camera's not very happy with me, it keeps turning off. But I have 2 left. Number 24 is a genre you've never read before. I struggled with this because I felt like I'd read every genre, which is ridiculous. I haven't read every genre. Who has? I mean, I'm sure some people have, but there are also subgenres, as Kendra kindly pointed out. So I've chosen The Power by Naomi Alderman because I actually realised I've never read a true sci-fi novel. I've read fantasy and dystopian, but I've never really read science fiction. So this is kind of like a feminist science fiction, which is really cool, right up my alley. In a strange turn of events, women hold the power, the physical power, so it sounds fascinating, and the views on this are quite polarized. I've heard, yeah, some people absolutely hated it and some people loved it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what I have to say about it and how I perceive the whole thing. That's another one I've got waiting for me at the library. Second last, these are actually 2 optional prompts at the end, 25 and 26. 25 is read a book by Virginia Woolf. I've had The Waves on my shelf for a really long time, so this is the perfect opportunity for me to get into it. And number 26 is a book by Flannery O'Connor. I haven't done my research yet. I've got a few of her books on my list to be read, but I need to do some looking into what I can access from the library or purchase online, and then I will update you on that. So this has been quite a long video. Thanks for being patient if you get all the way to the end. Yeah, that's my list. I'm sure I'll update you soon on what I do and don't read. I'm due to do a what I've read video soon because I actually haven't put one of those up since I've started BookTube. So I might do a half-yearly wrap-up at the end of June. I have a lot going on at the moment, as I mentioned earlier. I'm moving. I'm going to Sydney soon, and then I'm going on a weekend away with some friends. So one more thing, please get involved in the Reading Women's Challenge. I will link a link to the list below where you can see the list for yourself on their website. And Kendra is going to put together a playlist of videos that lots of other different people have made like this one, talking about the books that they are going to read in the Reading Women's Challenge and the June Readathon. So yeah, I highly recommend you fit as many into your year as you can, and please let me know what you're planning on reading in the comments, or if you've made a video about this list, link it below as well, and we can chat. Thanks so much guys, speak to you soon.